Hello, every game storming and waist cracking buddy, and happy 2020. Well, it's time for me to reflect on the past year of my YouTube channel and the games I played in 2019. So I haven't done a year in review video like this in a long time, so I think you'll enjoy it. This type of video will also be a new trend on my channel this year as well, because I'll be shifting towards uploaded videos again, and I'll slowly start shifting my streams over to Twitch. But for this video, I'll talk about most of the games I've touched and streamed in 2019, and I'll also explain how my taste in games changed as well. In fact, why don't we talk about that first? My interest in gaming waned a little bit in 2019, partly because I was so busy, but then also I shifted away from AAA games a little bit and more towards indie games, and you're going to see a mix of both of those in this video. There's a bunch of reasons for this. One of the biggest ones is that AAA developers and publishers, they've been botching many of these big launches lately. In fact, the letter B comes to mind. That's why there's so many B's in that sentence, I think. And another reason is that I've always wanted to support smaller, struggling indie developers anyway. And the main reason for that is because I became an indie game developer in 2019. And right away, I immediately understood their struggle to survive. It's hard to survive, let alone thrive. And these are the folks that essentially kickstarted the gaming industry back in the 70s. So I'll be playing and streaming many more indie games this year and supporting these underdogs. In fact, the first game we're going to talk about is an indie game. It's called Eastshade. So Eastshade was made by Eastshade Studios, surprise, and it was built mostly by one person whose name is Danny Weinbaum. And he spent 4 years developing this. It's essentially a non-combat mystery adventure, and it's set on an open-world island with several settlements in a large city. So he did gift me the game for free, and that's why I covered it. But it was excellent. I thought it was excellent whether he gifted it to me or not. He used the Unity engine. He also built his own custom LOD hexagonal rendering system. He had some major issues during launch week, and they still succeeded in pushing it out. He hired just a few people toward the end of the development cycle to launch it. So they were launching it from a home in upstate New Washington, and they were completely snowed in, and they still got it out anyway on time. So one of the interesting things about this game is that you paint in the game. You have like a painting and canvas interface, and you have to use it to be able to finish the game. So you're painting pictures of the landscape, which I think is really cool. I've seen this only once before, and that really enhanced the gameplay, I thought. And I streamed it in 4K on my channel, and I enjoyed it so much that I've been searching for more games like this. And it's hard to find games like this, but I'm sure they'll pop up in 2020. So next up in 2019 is a AAA game by Bethesda, and it's called Rage 2. So most of you know what this is, and I enjoyed the game. It was visually stunning, but I somewhat lost interest in the game after a while. In fact, I didn't even finish the main quest, let alone all the side quests. And I'm not really interested in the DLCs coming out or the ones that have already been released. So it was an open world, and it definitely felt pretty empty except for certain locations that may or may not even be a part of the main quest. Like this area you see here, it's called Gazcatraz. This was one of the more interesting locations. Some of the characters were colorful, but really not that memorable. In fact, I forgot the names of every character by this point, I think. Then one of the more interesting locations in the game is Mutant Bash TV, where you star in a show while being attacked by waves of mutants. And you're watching my show right now, and I think I did make it to the end without dying. So a question I posed to myself is, would I play Rage 3 or whatever the next game in the franchise would be? Well, I would say if Bethesda and id Studios can pull together a game that's much deeper, like a deeper story, deeper game mechanics, and pretty much deeper everything, and a much more fleshed out open world, then I would play it totally. I think they've almost got the recipe down pat. Rage 1 was a disaster. Rage 2 was, they're getting there. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I think if they spent a little bit more time really taking the franchise seriously, like they did Fallout, then I think there's some potential for Rage 3. Alright, so another game I played in 2019 was The Legend of Bumbo. Now, this is definitely an indie game, and it was a lot of fun. It was built by Edmund McMillan, and he's the one who did The Binding of Isaac. So it's a puzzle type of game with a rogue or arcade style where dead is dead, and the game ends when you've exhausted your hearts. And it was tons of fun. I streamed it once and I played it for hours and hours. So it was definitely addictive, but towards the end it was too grindy to unlock the last 2 Bumbos. And I did unlock every Bumbo except the very last one, and then I decided, that's enough. Okay, I think it's time to finally talk about Fallout 76. So this is the game that I've probably spent more time on than any other game all year. In fact, I'm certain of it. I've dumped about 400 or 500 hours into this game easily. Is it Bethesda's best game? No, it's actually, I think it's one of their worst, if not the worst game. The fact that it's the next installment in the Fallout franchise is why I play it. And most of the lore in the game and most of the story itself is canon, even though certain elements of the storyline are debatable whether they're canon or not. But they've released this game that's just so stuffed with thousands of bugs, they can never seem to reduce their bug list. They'll squash a few bugs and then they'll introduce almost as many new ones with each patch. It's kind of astounding that a AAA developer has released something this bad, and it's definitely the buggiest game I've ever seen come out of a AAA development studio like Bethesda. So anyway, is it getting better? Well, it's actually starting to improve very slightly, and I think with the introduction of the Wastelanders expansion this year, I think it'll suddenly get a lot better because it's their biggest expansion they've ever done for any game in the past. So maybe that will finally polish off Fallout 76. Who knows? Now, here's an interesting indie game that my friend Snuffleupagus introduced to me. And I played this game with her. It's called Ticktock, A Tale for Two. So I didn't play it on YouTube, but I streamed it over on Twitch. And it's a 2-player game. It requires co-op, 2 players, to finish the game. To actually play the entirety of the game. And I love these types of games. You see some of the gameplay here. It's mostly solving some rather complicated puzzles that require 2 people. The one person has to explain to the other what they're seeing on their screen and vice versa, and that's how we solve all the puzzles. In fact, when I streamed it, I did a split screen of my screen and Snuffleupagus's stream. Okay, so in that same vein, we also played a game called We Were Here. So We Were Here is actually the first game in a trilogy, the We Were Here trilogy. It's the same type of co-op. It requires 2 people to complete the game, 2 people to communicate with each other what they're seeing on their screen. And I liked this because it was a very tiny team that developed this, and they were so successful with this first one that we played. We're going to play the other 2 as well. It was called We Were Here 2 and We Were Here Together. We Were Here Together was released in 2019, and it won a Game of the Year award. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be playing that probably in February or March. Oh, and really quickly, one application I wanted to show you isn't a game, but it's called the Unigine Superposition, and it's a benchmark utility. The reason I ran this benchmark is because I shipped my PC to Indiana, and the graphics card actually sheared off the guide to the PCI 16 slot. So, I really should have taken the GPU out, but long story short, it's in the emergency PCI 8 slot now, so I ran the superposition against the same card but a different slot, and strangely it actually performs a little bit better. And here's the results. You can see them right here. So I'm going to be analyzing why it performs slightly better in the PCI 8 slot as opposed to the 16 slot, but more on that later. So once I got the graphics card up and running again, I bought The Outer Worlds by Obsidian, and unsurprisingly, it feels a lot like the same game mechanics as Fallout New Vegas, but honestly, it wasn't as deep, and for some reason I'm not as invested in the characters as the characters in Fallout New Vegas. In fact, there's nothing about The Outer Worlds that even compares closely to Fallout New Vegas. It's just kind of like somewhat like a watered down version of an open world RPG game, and it's really not necessarily open world. It's smaller planetary cells in different areas that you can load and explore. So I'm not going to talk too much about The Outer Worlds. I probably will never finish the game. I will play it a few more times. I might stream it a few more times. And if it goes, and if things really get interesting, and if the story really starts to get more compelling, then I'll keep playing it. But otherwise, I probably will lose interest and I won't finish it. And I'm going to show you two indie games very quickly. One is called Silver Chains. This was I'm almost certain it was a Ukrainian developer. Yeah, it was a Ukrainian developer who built this. It's an indie game. It's decent. It takes place in one mansion. So is it really worth the money? I don't think it's worth it unless it drops to about $7 or $8. Then it's worth trying out because it's good to support these indie developers. It is a playable game. It's just not very interesting or worth the money. And the mystery mechanics later on in the game, it's a horror mystery game, and the mystery mechanics get more confusing and difficult to decipher later on in the game. And then Lurk in the Dark is pretty much a Japanese train wreck with really patchy English, and the English in the game is so laughable. It's actually worth playing a game just to laugh at it. But Lurk in the Dark, there's a demo available on Steam and it's free. Finally, of course, a year in gaming wouldn't be complete without a romp through Fallout 4. And yes, I have been playing Fallout 4 a bit, just not as much as Fallout 76 because that kind of stole the spotlight for a while. But I do stream this occasionally and I do upload videos occasionally. One of the reasons is because it's still a very convincing story and a convincing wasteland. The graphics were quite astounding for a 2015 game, even though they were criticized and bashed for being substandard or like low quality. I don't think that's true for a 2015 game. But of course, graphics don't make everything. Graphics aren't everything in a game. The game mechanics are good. It was quite complex and deep, especially in survival mode. Now, Fallout 76 expanded on Fallout 4's survival mode and made it even more compelling, but I still like playing this game. I like producing content. I like showing off some of my settlements that I built, like this one right here. And of course, every time I play this game, I just dream about what Bethesda could possibly produce next if they actually get it right this time. The next Fallout installment could be Fallout 5, Fallout NCR, covering the whole NCR territory. That would be amazing. Or even something pre-war and post-war, kind of like what Fallout 4 did in the beginning. We're just going to have to wait a few years to see it. Well, those were most of the games that I played in 2019. I obviously missed some important AAA releases, and I completely missed some good PS4 exclusives like Days Gone because I don't have a console. But I'm holding off on consoles until the next gen are released, which will probably be the end of this year. But meanwhile, I'll be uploading and streaming not only games, but other types of content like fitness clips, vlogs, educational videos, and even more in the months to come. And remember, I'll be expanding on not only YouTube, but on Twitch and maybe even on Facebook. That's all for now. Make sure you're subscribed to the Culveyhouse channel, and you'll see me again very soon on a screen in your room. Thanks for watching.